In the USA, Trump attacks Zelensky after Ukraine leader doubts his peace claims. Donald Trump's bleak description of Ukraine, portraying its people as dead and the country as demolished, has raised questions about his willingness to compromise in future negotiations over Ukraine's fate. This reflects Trump's characteristic bluntness, though it's not clear if his depiction fully captures Ukraine's current situation, as there are ongoing efforts to rebuild. Trump contended that Ukraine should have made concessions to Russian President Vladimir Putin in the months preceding Russia's February 2022 invasion, arguing that even the worst deal would have been better than what we have now. This echoes Trump's often transactional approach to foreign policy, where any deal is seen as better than prolonged conflict, though such a position might be seen as dismissive of Ukraine's sovereignty. Trump, who has consistently criticized U.S. aid to Ukraine, frequently asserts that Russia would not have invaded if he had been president. He also claims that he would end the conflict if he were to return to the White House. Nevertheless, he seldom explores the specifics of the conflict. While Trump's assertions about preventing the invasion are bold, they lack specific evidence. His past foreign policy actions, however, suggest he may have handled the situation differently. Trump praised Russia and its predecessor, the Soviet Union, during an economic speech in North Carolina, following a recent debate about Ukraine's war victory. He stated that wars are what they do. His refusal to clarify his stance on Ukraine's success raises questions about where he stands on global alliances, and his praise of Russian military strength could be interpreted as admiration for authoritarian power. The former president, known for being sensitive to criticism, began his condemnation of Ukraine by referencing Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's recent critique of both Trump and his running mate J.D. Vance. Trump's sensitivity to personal slight seems to shape his foreign policy discourse, especially when addressing leaders like Zelensky who challenge his views. Trump portrayed Ukraine as a devastated nation outside of its capital, Kyiv, with a dwindling military and a shrinking population due to war deaths and emigration to neighboring countries. He questioned whether Ukraine still has leverage to negotiate an end to the war. This bleak portrayal could reflect Trump's skepticism about Ukraine's ability to recover, but it overlooks the resilience and military achievements that the country has demonstrated since the war began. Any deal, the worst deal, would have been better than what we have now, Trump remarked. If they made a bad deal, it would have been much better. They would have given up a little bit, and everybody would be living, and every building would be built, and every tower would be aging for another 2,000 years. Trump's emphasis on making a deal, even at the cost of some concessions, is in line with his preference for negotiation over prolonged conflict, though it might be seen as underestimating the long-term consequences of ceding territory to Russia. He added, "What deal can we make? It's demolished. The people are dead. The country is in rubble." This paints an extremely dire picture of Ukraine, but it's an oversimplification that disregards the efforts of Ukrainians to defend their land and rebuild where possible. Ukrainian forces have managed to defy predictions, despite initial expectations that Ukraine would swiftly fall to Russia. However, they continue to face intense battles in the east against one of the world's most formidable armies. The protracted conflict has resulted in the loss of tens of thousands of lives and a fifth of Ukraine's territory. This highlights the resilience and unexpected successes of Ukraine's military, even amid significant territorial and human losses, underscoring the high stakes of the conflict.
In the U.S., Hurricane Helene live tracker. Latest updates as Category 4. Storm approaches Florida tonight. Hurricane Helene was rapidly approaching Florida's Big Bend region on Thursday afternoon and was projected to make landfall with a devastating Category 4 intensity in a matter of hours. This sets an urgent tone, indicating the severity of the situation. Category 4 hurricanes are extremely dangerous, and a prompt response from residents and authorities is crucial. The National Hurricane Center has been issuing warnings, emphasizing that Helene, an abnormally large and fast-growing storm, could cause a life-threatening storm surge of 15 to 20 feet along parts of Florida's Gulf Coast. The storm surge warnings highlight the potential for significant flooding, which can cause extensive damage to coastal areas. The mention of the storm's rapid intensification also suggests that conditions may worsen faster than expected. Although Helene is expected to make landfall by Thursday night, its impacts will be felt much earlier. This is due to the storm's unusual size, with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, noting that Helene's wind field stretches as far as 275 miles from its center. The large wind field means that even areas far from the eye of the storm could experience dangerous winds, making this hurricane a broader threat than typical storms of its kind. The effects of Hurricane Helene are predicted to reach as far inland as the Appalachian Mountains. This underscores the hurricane's expansive reach, affecting not only coastal regions, but also areas far from the shoreline. Inland residents may need to prepare for strong winds and heavy rainfall, despite being far from the coast. Keep watching for possible updates about this.
In France, Michel Barnier's high-stakes policy debut. On Friday, September 27th, Michel Barnier convened his government at Matignon for their first seminar. After the difficult task of appointing his new government, the most challenging phase is yet to come. The general policy speech, scheduled for October 1st before Parliament. The Prime Minister has been engaged in numerous meetings throughout the week to prepare for this crucial event. The upcoming general policy speech appears to be a significant moment for Barnier, especially considering the high-stakes environment. His intense preparations suggest how pivotal this address will be for setting the tone of his leadership. Barnier is fully aware that his general policy speech will serve as a high-pressure initiation, during which he will unveil his policy agenda. It's a delicate balancing act, especially with the looming threat of potential censorship hanging over the government. The idea of a baptism of fire indicates the critical nature of this speech. Any missteps could result in immediate pushback or even attempts to destabilize his government, reflecting the volatile political landscape. To ensure he's fully prepared for this important speech, the Prime Minister has been conducting numerous meetings and actively listening to various stakeholders. All week, he has been consulting with relevant parties ahead of this major deadline. Barnier's method of wide-ranging consultations signals a desire to be well-informed and possibly indicates his attempt to create a broad-based consensus before announcing his policies. At the start of the week, Barnier visited the National Assembly to attend the Conference of Group Presidents. He also received individual consultations with trade union and employer organizations at Matignon. Engaging with both political leaders and labor representatives reflects Barnier's intent to address multiple aspects of French society in his policy approach. This could help him build credibility across the political spectrum. On Thursday, Ministers of the Interior and Justice, Bruno Retailleau and Didier Migaud, were invited to Matignon after they had clashed through the media. This meeting was not only to de-escalate tensions, but also to prepare for the measures Barnier will soon announce. Addressing internal disputes and aligning key figures before a major policy announcement seems like a strategic move to avoid public friction, which could otherwise undermine the government's messaging during this critical time.
In the USA and in the music industry, Sean Diddy Combs' dark reality is worse than expected. Sean Combs, known by various names including Puff Daddy, Puffy, P. Diddy, Diddy, PD, and Love, has been indicted by federal prosecutors as the leader of a criminal enterprise that allowed him to abuse, intimidate, and exploit women for years. The 14-page indictment was released by the Southern District of New York on September 17. This shift from a celebrated figure in the music industry to a criminal defendant is dramatic and raises serious questions about the potential double life of a prominent public figure. A day before the indictment was unsealed, Diddy was apprehended at the Park Hyatt Hotel in Manhattan and detained by Homeland Security agents. He has entered a plea of not guilty to 3 criminal charges: extortion conspiracy, sex trafficking, and transportation to engage in prostitution. These are extremely serious charges, and his not guilty plea sets the stage for what could be a lengthy and high-profile legal battle. Diddy's alleged freak-offs, or drug-fueled sex parties, and his workers' efforts to hide them are revealed in the indictment. Officials said the 54-year-old, worth $400 million, engaged in a consistent and widespread pattern of emotional, physical, and sexual abuse of women, and then used bribery and intimidation to pressure witnesses and victims into silence. A source told In Touch that the reality is even worse than what's publicly known. The indictment is startling. The source's comment about things being even worse adds a chilling layer, suggesting that the extent of the alleged abuse might be more severe than what's currently exposed in the indictment. Prosecutors claim that Diddy used his music industry success to lure women into romantic relationships, then used force, threats, and coercion to force them into prolonged sexual acts with male sex workers during elaborate sex performances. These multi-day events involved physical and drug-related exhaustion, requiring IV fluids for recovery, according to the indictment. This description is both graphic and deeply disturbing, painting a picture of calculated and sustained exploitation. The involvement of force and coercion, if proven true, would show a pattern of extreme abuse of power. The indictment also specifies that these gatherings were well stocked with drugs, such as oxycodone, cocaine, alprazolam, and ketamine, in addition to other disturbing substances. For example, during the March raids on Diddy's residences, authorities allegedly discovered over 1,000 bottles of baby oil and lubricant. The mention of these substances and supplies adds another layer of discomfort, suggesting that these parties were both physically and psychologically harmful to those involved. The $35 million Florida mansion and the $61.5 million California property owned by Diddy were discovered during a search by a Homeland Security agent. The Florida estate was replete with sex toys, bondage apparatus, lingerie, and concealed cameras. The agents disclosed that a significant number of the women involved were either under the legal age or scarcely of legal age, and that the incident was being documented from multiple perspectives. The presence of hidden cameras and the focus on young, possibly underage women is especially troubling. It points to a level of premeditation and manipulation that raises grave concerns about the potential scale of the abuse. Thanks for joining us for today's roundup of trending news. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more updates. Share your thoughts on these stories in the comments below.